Hey guys, Coach Eric, Coach Dell here, and we want to talk about something that has been on our minds for a very long time. We've had a lot of great discussions, and it's one of those things that might be a little bit of a sensitive subject to some people, but essentially we want to talk about who might not really be benefiting from a yoga practice, or at least people who may need to reconsider how they do their yoga.
Right.
So one of the concepts that people aren't very familiar with is something called hypermobility. And my friend Dell here is a very veteran and talented yoga instructor who is hypermobile. In other words, you are a bendy person.
I'm one of those bendy people.
You are very bendy, yeah. It's very impressive. You could have been an acrobat or a contortionist probably at some point in your life. But yoga was very attractive to you getting in. You want to, I mean, that's kind of a story you see a lot with yoga instructors.
Absolutely, and for me, I had gone through a divorce and was kind of at a low point in my life, and I was wondering, oh, what does make me feel good? And I got into a hot yoga class, and bam, that made me feel good because it's very based on flexibility. A lot of the shapes that they'll get into. So I felt like I was good at it.
And you get some positive feedback from other people, like, "Oh, your poses are so beautiful. Oh my God, I can't believe you can do that."
Right.
And you know, we want to feed into that even more because we like being good at stuff.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, if you're really, really flexible, you can start to do some damage to your ligaments and tendons because they're kind of the most vulnerable parts of our body. Tendons are where the bone and the muscle attach, and ligaments are what attaches bone to bone, and they're smaller pieces of connective tissue. And once they tear, depending on the intensity of the tear, it can be really, really hard to repair, or they might never get their contracting functionality back all the way. So people who are very bendy can get very, very hurt doing yoga.
We're at high risk, and I think even in addition to tearing, which is the worst case scenario, I would think of connective tissue, there's also this for hypermobile individuals, because our connective tissue is longer or more stretchy, more elastic, our skeleton, our bones have a tendency to come out of alignment.
That's right.
As well.
Yeah.
And then we have this whole firing of muscles that maybe we're not intentionally trying to fire.
That's right.
So it just can cause a slew of pain, injury.
It can, yeah. I've known a lot of yoga, longtime yoga practitioners and even instructors who have had some serious injuries, and it is basically either completely derailed their practice where they had to stop, or it completely changed it, and they're practicing very differently now, hopefully for the better. So what we want to talk about today are some ways that if you are really bendy and hypermobile, some critical elements that you need to consider in every pose so you can enjoy your yoga practice and make the best out of it for years and years to come. Okay, so this silly contraption that I made is essentially two sticks with a band in between, but they are stapled with 3 staples into this stick. Now, what I want to demonstrate with this is we're going to call this a ligament, right? And obviously the most vulnerable part of the ligament is the insertion point on the bone. Now if you just kind of dump into a yoga pose without thinking about setting it up very cleanly and very methodically, it would be like us pulling apart, and then all of the tension is right there at that insertion point. And let's say you jump too fast or you just do too many of them, then you're going to have a possible tear or an injury. So what we do in functional fitness when we talk about yoga is something called torque. And torque is a way that we protect the joints, and in yoga poses we call this entering the pose. That means I start to create these anchoring situations with my skeletal rotation in order to protect that insertion point. So just to kind of demonstrate what that would look like, I'm going to roll or rotate the bone so that the band wraps around a little bit more tight, and then Dell's going to do that as well. And then as you can see, once we have that torque, we can feel pretty safe making more and more length and depth in our poses. So now I want to take a look at a few particular poses that you and I see a lot of dumping and a lot of skeletal misalignments that look like, oh, you're really, really deep into a pose, but man, I wouldn't do that too many more times.
That's exactly right.
Stay tuned, let's look at those poses. So the first pose that I want to show is a pretty common pose, and we'll just do Warrior 2. The leg position that you see in a lot of exercise poses, extended side angle, Warrior 1. You guys know what it looks like. So I'm going to have Dell step into a Warrior 2 pose with her feet. Okay. Now because she's super flexible, hypermobile, she can just drop right into that pose, right? So we don't even worry about the arms. So just look at the legs, right? She's deep, she's a lot deeper than I'm gonna get. But over time, you can see the load from her torso is deeply going into these hip sockets and possibly even the joints in the knees. So come on up out of that for a second. And we're gonna talk about how to enter a pose. Now think about like when you're a kid, and we've used the analogy before of stacking blocks. So when you are making a block tower as a kid, you try to make it as tall as you want to. The most important blocks are the very first ones that you lay down. Because if they are misaligned, then that tower is going to fall down. It's going to have some vulnerabilities. So the foundation in yoga is always what is touching the floor, right? So in this case, the feet are her foundation. So I'm going to have her step back into that yoga pose, but I'm not going to have her bend her knees too much or drop down into the position. So first thing she needs to do is she needs to turn on the arches of her feet. Now in this position, typically speaking, most Westerners have falling arches. Now some people have very high arches and it's a little bit different for them, but either way, she wants to have equal pressure pressing into the big toe mound, as well as the ankles slightly pulling away outwardly to create that functional tension in the foot. So now the arch is engaged, right?
Yeah, and that immediately contracts my glute.
Exactly right. There's things turning on.
That way I'm not dumping. Yeah.
The back foot, very similarly, we focus on the outer blade pressure of the foot while simultaneously pushing down in the big toe mound. So I've got energy going outward and I've got energy going inward, right? Great. Now we build the pose up a little bit. Now before she starts to bend her knees, I'm actually going to move up into her hips. An anchoring position of the hips means putting the pelvis in a neutral position, because a lot of times when people do a Warrior 2, they just bend the knee and they stick their butt out, and the pelvis is not in the right alignment. So what we do here is we call it tailbone tuck. We're lifting the hip points up so that the pelvic bowl is now not spilling any water per se, right? So now we've rolled the stick on one side and we've rolled the stick on the other side, the feet and the hips. Now, before she bends the knee, she's going to maintain this energy in the feet, the energy in the hips, and then she's going to slowly start bending the knee forward. Now that tension right there, you probably see she's not quite as deep, but it feels very productive, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
Good. The other thing we want to make sure of is that her knee isn't buckling, but that she's rotating the thigh bone in order to accentuate the torque that she is developing by trying to maintain that pelvic bowl. And you'll even get the quivers because it's like, oh man, this is a completely different pose. So now we're balancing strength with mobility, and you're using the belly of the muscle when you stretch, as opposed to loading the joints a little bit more. Very good. You can pop on that. Yeah, it's a different. It's
that totally is.
And also, you know, just neurologically speaking, you are building even more body awareness, and especially when it comes to strength. We like to think of yoga a lot of times as a stretching type of exercise, but we can develop so much strength. And when I say strength, I mean connectivity.
Yeah.
Taking out the weak links in the chain. That feel okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. You ready to do another one?
It's different for me. Like even as much as I've practiced yoga, I've noticed recently a lot of just kind of dumping inside of my own body, no matter how strong I think I am.
Yeah.
And so I know it's a huge focus for me right now is trying to adjust some of my practices in my own yoga.
That's right.
You know, in my own body.
It's also why I'm really excited for you as you've been teaching, because we have a lot of hypermobile people here at SIVA, and Dell is a great person to have that experience of years of being bendy and going deeper into poses, and now she's recalibrating more and more and finding out those safety mechanisms, and your practice is improving. And after 10 years, that's great to feel.
Yeah,
that
it is. It's like another learning curve to go out, you know?
Well, let's take a look at upward facing dog, because that one's got some big missteps in it for hypermobile people. So stay tuned. I'm going to adjust the camera real quick and we'll get a little bit closer. Okay. So upward facing dog, right? There are 3 key places where I see bendy people possibly injuring themselves: the elbows, shoulders, and the low back. Sometimes the neck too, but let's just stick with those 3 first. We're going to have Dell enter the pose here a little bit differently. First of all, you'll notice that her elbows are locked. Most people will do that completely unconsciously, and if you're hypermobile, you are actually going beyond vertical. Her elbows are literally bending in the opposite direction when she locks them. Now that feels stable to you, but not over the long haul. So for a hypermobile individual, I'm going to have her put a micro bend in her elbows. And that, coupled with proper hand engagement, keeping the pointer finger mound down on the ground and digging in your claws a little bit, her muscles are going to probably start to shake. Now, we've taken care of the elbow situation. The shoulder situation, people want to hike the shoulders up into the ears because they're very mobile, but also that's an indicator that the lats, this big muscle right here, is a little underdeveloped. So she's going to pull her shoulders and depress them away from the ears and stabilize that whole shoulder girdle. Now the next thing is to support the lumbar spine. Show me a bad up dog real quick, would you? Yeah, good. So right here, shoulders are dumped. She's got so much pressure on her lumbar spine. Her SI joint is vulnerable. Somebody's going to have an issue over a long time with this, right?
Absolutely.
Good. Come on out of there. I don't want you to do that.
I'm like, maybe me.
Yeah. So, how I'm going to enter the upward facing dog pose, just remember, just like we did in that previous pose, we tilted the pelvis. So I'm going to have her actually round her back like a cat. Right? Now she's engaging her abdomen here. She's squeezing the abs into the lumbar spine, and her glutes are starting to engage too. So the pressure of the abs going this way and the glutes pressurizing in the opposite direction is giving her a lot of stability in that pelvic girdle and lumbar spine. Now she packs her shoulders, she micro bends her elbows and rotates the elbow pits forward. So with that rotation, the lats are firing even more. Now, slowly descend the hips forward as you continue to engage the abs and glutes, and then let the spine find its length. Very nice. Continuing that tension down here. How does your low back feel?
Much better.
That's good. Your shoulders are getting stronger. You're working on that torque rotation in the arms. Hands are grounded. Now what she does with her head, you know, she can look up, but if she dumps into the neck, no good. So she tucks her chin in a little bit and she can gaze upward, but now she's got that connectivity all the way from the top of her head down to her coccyx, and the whole spine is integrated. That's a great looking up dog. Very nice. Good. Come on out.
I definitely, as hypermobile, it's always, like you said, it's the elbows and those wrists and the packing of the shoulders that I end up needing to bring my attention to, getting that torque.
And most people who have wrist problems from a lot of chaturangas and up dogs, it started in the shoulders. They didn't have the torque and the shoulder stability. So the next adjacent joints, the weaker guys, were doing a lot more work than they needed to do, and that just ultimately turned into some type of inflammation and
injury.
Little injuries. That's right. Let's do one more pose. We'll go through like a twist sequence, prayer twist, and
revolve,
and then lunge prayer twist as well. Okay. So twisting poses are notorious for injuries as well if they're done improperly. And one of the things we need to realize is where we're supposed to twist from. And you've done some great videos in your quick fixes about this issue, but knowing the spine is designed to twist from the thoracic area, which is right in the middle in that solar plexus. It's not designed to twist from the hips. And with a lot of poses, we find the hips are stable when the legs are doing their job. Basically, if the legs are strong enough, then the hips can't move, and that allows us to move from the ribs. That tailbone tuck that we've practiced, or the lifting of the hip points, that helps stabilize the pelvis, and when you corkscrew those feet and keep them anchored, then you can twist from the ribs without moving anything down here. So you have to think, how do I stabilize my foundation in a twisting asana pose, right?
Right.
So we were talking about prayer twist or prayer. Let's do the lunge variation. You want to show that?
Yep.
So Dell steps forward.
You can bring a knee down even.
Absolutely, yeah. If you find that your legs are wobbly and they're not strong enough to maintain that stability in the pelvis, you put all those poses have modifications with the knees down. So let's say she feels confident and she comes up off of her knees. So she's really going to drive through that back heel to engage the back leg nice and strong, and she set up her front foot the exact same way that she did in Warrior 2. Now I'm just going to have her practice really slowly rotating from the rib area and the rib area only, with the idea of not moving the waist.
I can do that.
Good. Yeah, just there you go. Nice. Press through that back heel. Put your brain in your feet.
Ooh, I like back heel.
Perfect. Good. Relax and shake it out for a second. Good, because I need you for a few more minutes. Right? Okay. So when she enters the lunge twist, she's going to set up her legs first and foremost. I'm going to have her raise her left arm up overhead, right? And now she's going to fold her belly to her thigh and reach with her fingers. Keep your brain in that back leg, and now you can begin to twist towards the camera and take your elbow, placing it on your thigh. Now she's not going to go too deep at this point. She's going to reconfirm her back heel pressing behind her, and then if she feels confident that her hips aren't moving, she can put her hands in prayer position and add some of that pressure with the intention of opening the chest a little bit more, but not with the sacrifice of any movement in the legs. Very nice. Good. Inhale, slowly come out and shake it off. Very nice. Very good. Same thing with the seated prayer twist that we do, whether you're on your sitting on a block or sitting on the ground, or like the chair pose when the knees are together. Good. So what she's going to do is what she talked about in her last video, is that she knows if her knees move, like if one knee comes farther out than the other, then that's the hips moving, right? So she pulls her ankles away from each other gently and sets her feet, turns on those arches, and now, only twisting from the ribs, will she decide to go into a pose. If she was unable to take her elbow to the outside of her leg without moving her knees and her hips, then all she would do is elevate a little bit, because that's the medicine. That's all yoga is where do I root, where do I move from? Stability and mobility, and trying to find that balance. Very nice. Good. But all of this initiates into that, or expands that idea of torque. I have a root, and then I'm rotating something to ground myself so I can move from the right places. You got to have strength and mobility to have a functioning body, and we're just, I think a lot of it comes down to the idea that yoga has been so good for us Westerners when it comes to reducing stress, because those stress cocktails after long mental days that are exhausting, that stress cocktail gets in your tissue, you go to a yoga class and you move it around, and that's how it leaves the body. That's amazing. However, after a couple years of practice, you start feeling some aches and pains. They're not random. They're telling you something about your mechanics.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know, the entire purpose of yoga is to balance your strength and flexibility.
To yoke.
And I think that we forget that a lot of times by trying to push ourselves into a contortionist shape or the idea of a shape, rather than feeling connected inside of our body and how we can build the strongest structures that move.
That's right. I am the exact opposite of Dell. I am tight. I'm a runner and I lift weights, so my muscles are really good at contracting. Her muscles are really good at lengthening. So I have to find my own type of strategy when it comes to yoga, but I'm still always in the idea that it's going to be a safe practice. But my Warrior 2 is nowhere near hers. None of my poses are. My poses are my poses. Yep. Your poses are your poses. Yep. And even though we're working on the exact same principles, it will never ever look the same, because you and I aren't the same person.
We do different things.
That's right.
We're
different
male
people.
And female. That's the most
There's
obvious.
that.
But we're doing different things with our lives.
And genetic bone structure on top of it, just the way we were born. So stop looking at the instructor and thinking that that's what my pose is supposed to look like. Listen to the cues and try to use some of these grounding mechanisms, and remember that there is a balance between the stability and strength and the mobility and the flexibility in each pose.
Yeah, take care of your body.
That's right, guys. Hey, thanks for watching. Hope you found this valuable. If you know somebody who's really bendy and stretchy or hypermobile, tag them in the comments. I'm sure they might find some value in this video. Thanks, guys.